Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome the next guest that I have on the Quantum Leap Business Show, going around the world delivering insights, inspiration and ideas to small business owners globally. And on the show this afternoon, we have Hines. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Yeah, well, good ever what time of day it is anywhere around the world. Good to be here.
So Chris, particularly for my son-in-law down in Australia, who's an architect on the Gold Coast and Surfers Paradise, and he's got a couple little grommets that he taught to surf before they could walk just about. What's the attraction with surfing?
Surfing's one of those things, I think, that grips you from the first time you ever do it. I think, it's been a major part of my life. That interaction with the ocean, for the wonderful playground that it is, incredibly lucky to have it there. And as a surfer, to be able to play on that kind of pulse of natural energy that's only kind of there for a fleeting few seconds is just one of life's highs, really. I think Timothy Leary, didn't he? The old psychedelic kind of guru. He said that, probably it's one of the purest things, almost the kind of the pinnacle of our civilization, is to be locked in that absolute moment. So, your mind isn't anywhere else.
A lot of people would agree with you, Chris.
Yeah.
So, your green credentials go before you, and the back into the last century. I know you started off with the SAS, and for people out there, no, it wasn't in the military. You started a group called Surfers Against Sewerage. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we formed an organisation called Surfers Against Sewage back in May 1990, and we did so because at that point all we wanted to be able to do was to go surfing, enjoy the coast, the wonderful thing that it was. Unfortunately, there were 400 million gallons of completely crude sewage being discharged around the coastal waters of the UK every single day. Maggie Thatcher, our Prime Minister, stated on BBC Nature that all sewage was treated before discharge. That was a downright lie. So our politicians were lying. When we asked what was going to happen about it, they said nothing. You can keep surfing in a superhuman excrement and get panty liners and condoms stuck to your head. And that's your future, basically. And we went, well, stuff that for a lark, and off we went. And we formed an organisation. Within 10 months of forming, we were at the Houses of Parliament calling for change, and a hard-nosed 10-year campaign. And, we helped sort it all out, really. We helped trigger a £5.5 billion spend on the clean-up of the UK's coastal waters. Regrettably, since 2005, the water industry in the UK seemed to have sat on their laurels and not done any further improvements whatsoever. And we're now seeing lots and lots of storm overflows. I think it's 400,000 again, discharges from storm overflows going into our rivers and off our coastal waters. And hats off to, the current team, Hugo Tagholm and the rest of the Surfers Against Sewage team, who are doing an amazing job. But it's so sad that they've had to go back to that same situation. And unfortunately, this time, there are no European directives to help them. The UK did this dumbass thing of Brexiting and believing our politicians when they said, don't worry, we'll uphold those same environmental standards. We won't. Unfortunately, we're not doing so, and it's shocking.
Yeah. And
a global disgrace for a country that prides itself so strongly on its maritime heritage to be treating our waterways and our oceans like we do. Yeah. And especially going into COP26, we're not leading.
Yep. And that's flown over into a few things like straws and fishing nets and the amount of pollution in oceans. So what can the average business owner and I guess indeed individual do to play their part in the whole program of creating a better planet and more clean planet on which to live?
I think we, as individuals, but also as companies and organizations, it automatically maximizes up and multiplies the effect of what you can do as an individual. And if you read Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, if you read his book Values, you'll see that, you know, there is a change, a fundamental change. If you think that just making profit is what businesses are about, then you're way, way, way behind the curve. And you're probably behind some of your competitors. You need to think of the triple bottom line of how you financially make your profit, and you look after the environment, and you look after your people. So one of the first things I would say, even if you don't go through the full accreditation for being B Corporation, work with someone who can help you go through the first range, the first take on your business impact assessment, and have a look, because it'll just expand your mind on what you can do. And of course we can, you know, look at reducing all of our plastics, and especially single-use plastics, but it's more than that. It's about, where does our energy come from? You know, when we buy product in, do we know, is it turning up in, you know, excess packaging? What do we do with the packaging? Are we sending packaging that doesn't need to be there off with our products and things? But the biggest one is, where do we source our energy?
Yep.
Because we can all, even if we can't do it immediately, we should be if you can do it immediately, change to green tariff, to a renewable energy source. And if you can't, because you're in a premises that is rented and you collectively buy your power, then ask your landlord, you know, what can you change to renewable energy source? And if you don't, we will be looking for other premises.
Yep.
We need to make these changes happen, and we need to do it really, really urgently, really urgently.
And I think that's becoming very obvious. People to the show will be recognising BBX and its service with carbon offset credits, and the guys there that are up at the COP26 at the moment are doing very well, from what I understand. So I think the whole focus, if you can become greener or more environmentally friendly, and in turn through your supply chains and your customer chains and your PR and your marketing, I think, you know, that's probably some of the things that we can all do a lot more of, and have an end benefit for everybody.
Yeah, and you know, if you're going to want to recruit the best staff, your best team to come and work for you, this generation who are coming up now, they're going to be looking around, and they, you know, yes, you might get some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the kind of the less skilled people, but if you want the best people working for you, they're going to be asking this question. They're going to be looking at different companies, and they might be in exactly the same sector. It might be your competitor that they will go and work for if your competitor has better environmental credentials and practices.
Yep.
And again, you know, one of the important things is for us all to realize that we can make this change happen. If you look at the kind of history of what we as a species have managed to do, it's pretty amazing. What we now need to do is to make sure that we apply all of that ingenuity, all of those, you know, the inventiveness, the inquisitiveness, the desire to make change happen, that we've got centuries of it, and we need to apply that to the challenges that are facing us now. And importantly, to understand that we are connected to every single person right the way around the world.
Yep. Yep, and even more so, I think the old 6 degrees of separation is put more like about 1.8 to 2.2 nowadays. With
I would say, yeah, this is absolutely game on. And again, you know, I've heard the phrase a couple of times recently, but a friend of mine, Kwame, he's not environmental at all, but at one point he said to me, you know, Chris, when are we going to get to the Star Trek times, when everybody on the bridge of the, you know, the Enterprise have all got that same collective view and interest, which is to, you know, work together.
Yep.
And that needs to come, and that will be, you know, we may see quite difficult, quite challenging times over the next couple of decades, but we have to kind of understand that we probably have more in common with each other than we do that divides us. And that sadly was the quote from you know, varying people have kind of said that kind of thing, but Jo Cox, the MP, who was unfortunately kind of murdered over here in the run into Brexit, that was one of her very strong sayings. But we do, and again, I think another kind of couple of little quick things that come to mind there is, one, we have to believe in science and engineering and the value of experts. You know, if I said to someone now that I think I've come up with this brilliant idea, I think I'm going to make, you know, brake pads out of wood, people would go, no. We you know, brake pads are pretty good. They work pretty well. They bring wood ones. And I could argue that they were wrong and that sustainable one would be a wooden one.
Yep.
And I would be wrong because the engineers and the experts have done it. But we live in a world now where people make these decisions. And it's stuff like that around, like, you know, the COVID vaccinations and things like that. You know, these are scientists. These aren't people who've just made all of this up. You know, so sadly as well, in our own little tiny village here, where I'm talking to from Cornwall, it was on the news last night that anti-vaxxers had graffitied and slashed down with Stanley knives, cut up the very facilities where people go to have their vaccinations.
Yep.
Now, even if they don't want their vaccination, what right do those people have to inflict and to destroy something like that? That's a criminal act. But it's also, again, I was talking to someone earlier, you know, where have we suddenly given the right of some people who are basically reading information that has no scientific background whatsoever, no scientific rigor, hasn't been peer reviewed, and yet they just make this decision and think it's the right thing.
Yep. Yeah, I know. And that's
so we have and you can't say I don't believe in COVID because it's science, and then but I believe in climate change. And there are some people really conflicted between those two things here.
Yep.
And it's tough. We have to go along with some science and experts if we're going to get out of this hole.
Yep. Chris, the BBC described your group as the coolest pressure group. What was all that about? And I know you're bloody effective, creating $5 billion of investment into our coastlines, but how could you be the coolest pressure group?
Well, I think because surfing's cool. Surfing is the ab man's dream. Surfing's used to sell everything from beer to aftershave to washing up powder, etc. And what we did, I guess, was to use that same kind of level of coolness to sell the message of clean seas. Because back in those days, there weren't as many surfers as there were. It's still quite a fringe sport, not like in Australia where it's kind of like a national institution with people like Tom Carroll and Rabbit and McFanning now and people like that. So it was tiny. So we were using that kind of way of the Beach Boys, the cool imagery that was used to sell everything else, to sell the message of clean seas. But we also knew our brief, and we knew our brief absolutely to the nth degree. We were called to go and give evidence to House of Lords and Commons select committees at our Parliament. I did brief the President of the European Parliament, etc. So, it's a combination of those two. But yeah, absolutely, we were. I guess, in some people's eyes, we were pretty cool.
You're also
not quite so much now because I've got lots of grey hair.
Oh well, I think that's not a prerequisite to having to retire from anything these days.
No, absolutely no.
You were special advisor to Michael Meacher, the Minister for the Environment. What were your best inputs to that, do you think?
Well, I was only it didn't go on for very long because we won basically, but. I first met Mr. Meacher just before Labour came to power in 97. And we were doing a press call on the beach down at Brighton. And he made a statement to the camera and said, under the European directive, this town place of size of Brighton requires at least primary treatment. And I butted in and said, well, that's actually a mistake. It requires at least secondary treatment under the directive. And he looked at his assistant, and his assistant said, oh, no, this guy's Mr. Pooh. He knows everything about sewage. So he asked me what he should say, and I said it's secondary. So he did that. That was in December 96. In 97, they came to power. May 97, September, I was asked to go to a meeting in the Houses of Parliament, to act as a special advisor to him. And I guess the best bit was in that meeting, one of the civil servants present said, you can't build a UV, tertiary treated sewage treatment works for a place the size of Brighton. And I said, well, Welsh Water, Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water, have just switched one on for Swansea, which is 165,000 people. And, you know, Brighton's about 180. So we're on the same scale here. And he kind of noted that down and looked at his civil servant, and his civil servant did this kind of crumpled Charlie Brown smile and went, yeah, I guess that's true, Minister. And that was the kind of moment, and he kind of like, that was the moment. And I walked out of that meeting 2 hours later, punching the air. And yeah, 6 weeks after that, the government ruled that all sewage should receive at least secondary with tertiary treatment, UV or microfiltration, for 14 out of the 20 million people discharging around coastal waters. So yeah, a pretty good one. Sadly, Mr. Meacher passed away, but yeah, he did a couple of brilliant bits of work while he was Secretary of State.
Chris, most people will know about the Eden project down pretty close to where you are, and you were involved as a director, among other things, with that. And you also implemented the PANTS process. What's PANTS all about?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, but this thing of triple bottom line, which was a concept that the brilliant John Elkington coined this phrase back in the 90s. But we were running it past people initially at Eden, and they were going, oh, you know, it sounds a bit, you know, it sounds all too weighty and complicated. And then someone I knew said, well, it just looks like a pair of Y fronts, that kind of diagram. So we dubbed it, and we kind of came up with a graphic that had PANTS. So there was environmental, financial, and social, and the social bit was round about the crutch area. And that was what we used as a tool to make it a little bit humorous, to make it, again, that kind of way of engaging people quickly into something, and a bit more general. So lots of serious thought behind it, and that brilliant concept of John Elkington's. But that's what PANTS was. And the process there is that you take into consideration the economic, financial, and social aspects of every decision you make. And the big one that I've always taken away from Eden, when Eden Project first opened, 1.9 million visitors a year, no waste management facilities whatsoever. So literally every paper, cups, fork, spoon, everything was all going straight to landfill. And we looked at the triple bottom line, the PANTS impact of putting in a dishwasher.
Yep.
Environmentally, by putting in a dishwasher, we reduced our landfill by 8 tons a year. We reduced the carbon and material impact of manufacture and transportation to us and from us. Socially, we created 2 jobs. People got a nicer cup of tea because they could have it in a proper cup or mug. Yep. And they could also, suddenly their diets improved because rather than a floppy cardboard plate, they could put salad on as well as the main kind of meal. And then financially, so those were the social gains. And then financially, we sold more tea, we sold more salad, and we saved ourselves £159,000 over 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a classic little example of triple bottom line thinking, PANTS thinking.
Yep.
Improving. And lots of people say, oh, the environment cost, but it doesn't always. And that's a big, big myth to bust down. By the time you look at the environmental and the social aspects of it, it often pays off. Especially that thing of retaining staff. You know, anybody out there who thinks that, you know, they can be a little bit fly and that their team don't, you want your team to stick to you because you do the right thing. And you want to listen, because every time you go and have to try and recruit someone new, whoa, there's a cost.
Yep.
You know, in disrupted output of whatever whether it be manufacture or intellectual output, but also the whole process of recruiting. It's a long process, that, and it's costly.
Yep. Good points, Chris. So, Chris, why is it, do you think, in a nutshell, that governments around the world are so reluctant to get to carbon zero now? Not in 2060 or some number like I saw the other day with Saudi Arabia of all people.
Yeah, Saudi and in India have just said 2070 yesterday.
Yeah. And I get it that some countries in the world haven't had the benefit of economic development that the so-called development countries have. But at the end of the day, I guess we all live on the same planet. And with COP26 in Glasgow going on right now, what do you hope beyond your wildest dreams that might come out of that as actually a bit of action rather than talk fest?
Well, I think that's absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head there. This has to be action. It needs to start like right now. And we don't, we're not going to wait for government. I think the reality is there, we have to go quicker than the governments are going. They've known about this for a long, long time. 20, 30, 40 years. Some of the big oil companies knew what the impacts were a long time ago. And the problem is we've delayed it. And the longer we've delayed it, if we'd spread this cost, if we'd started doing this 20 years ago, the costs would be far less. And we'd be starting to hit those targets, because those industries, those new change companies would be, and the new way of being would already be starting to roll out. We'd be getting used to it. So delaying again just delays, increases the cost, increases the negative impacts that are going to happen on us. And it's just pushing it away. If anybody in business, and this is where the business world needs to come through, if you know you've got a problem, you deal with it as soon as you can. Yep. You don't go back. You imagine if someone now went back to their board and said, oh, yeah, I know I've got a major problem with one of the manufacturing plants, or we've got a major problem down in HR, but you know what? We're not even going to deal with that this year. We're going to put that off for 20 years. Yep. Your board would be going, hang on, you're the chief exec. What are you talking about? We need to get going, and we need to get going on it now. Now, I think people like India a bit, I completely understand. We've got this thing where, the West and the developed, for want of a better word, nations have already had the good times. And therefore we're now expecting them to not. We've got to help them financially. And that has to happen. We've got to equal up our carbon footprints, our national carbon footprints and per head of population. They've got to equal up. There's an old process that's, I'd say old, it's 15 years old, probably a bit more now, contraction and convergence, that brings those together. So everybody ends up with roughly the same footprint. But that probably also accounts for financial outcome as well, quality of life.
Yep.
And so we have to take other people with us. And if we don't, we're looking at mass migration. We already are looking at mass migration, and we know the political instability that will cause. So this is coming at us. It's coming at us pretty hard. There was a UNICEF report that said that the Syrian war was part triggered by climate change. That's only the very tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
We have to tackle this as a global population. It's a global problem. We have to help everybody.
Yep, I'm sure that there's many listeners out there that totally agree. Chris, you're the core of a group called A Grain of Sand. Can you please share what that ideal is? It's mostly largely me, but the kind of principle there is small, irritating, but out comes the odd pearl. So it's that. I guess I've got a bit of reputation. It's probably not going to change from where I am now. That you have to call things out. You have to apply the pressure. You have to be, that little irritant that tries to ask people the bloody awkward question, that will say it as it is sometimes. Yep.
That's the principle. And if I can work with anybody on those kind of principles, I do.
Yep.
That's a grain of sand.
Sounds like.
And also, I guess there's another little thing that, if you got 1 million grains of sand, that starts to be quite a lot.
Yeah, becomes more than an irritation.
Yeah, and we can all and we're all, we're all little bits of a grain of sand. We can all make that change.
Yep. Chris, you're an advocate of value rather than price, as I am. Can you share why you think that way?
Because anything that you buy has layers of value behind it. So again, it's back to, I was with some people this morning, a little tiny company called Rio Nuevo Chocolate. And these two, Andres and Sarah, he's from Ecuador, she's from Colombia. They're in Cornwall making these amazing chocolate bars. And yes, they're a bit more expensive financially, but the social delivery, 60% of one of their bars of chocolates goes directly back to the people, or is out of the price of the bar to the farmers in Ecuador. And they're then using that to protect the rainforest and the cloud forest. So that's that kind of, those other two values of when I'm buying something. I'm looking for what the environmental and the social benefits of it are. I'm wearing a Patagonia jacket. I'm sitting in my shed with it on because it's, so that I don't need to turn the heaters up. Yep. But again, there's more values to this and I also value it because I know the story behind it, and I'll repair it and I'll look after it and I'll love it. And I think all too often, you can't buy 2 T-shirts for £10 and think that someone or something, probably both, is suffering for you to be able to have that. And the other thing that happens with 2 T-shirts for £10 is you don't value them at all. You think of them as throwaway.
Yep. Because
there is no value.
Chris, and wise words. Chris, the cost of energy is pretty topical at the moment with, I don't know, what's it up to, 13 or 14 energy companies going broke here in the UK in recent weeks. What can the average business or person do? I know you've talked about a couple of things, but in particular relationship to energy, what are some of the things, other than sitting in your coat there and not turning the heater on, that we can do to mitigate our consumption of energy and perhaps move to more cleaner sources?
So get an energy audit, get one of those kind of experts to do a monitor on where your energy is, where it's peaking and flowing. And there's companies out there who can do that for you, because I bet your bottom dollar, most of us are wasting a whole lot. It'll be 10 or 20%. Now, if I said to someone, the boss of a company, open your wallet and give me 10% of your energy bill, they'd say no.
Yep.
But they're quite happy for it to be being wasted. And that's the kind of first step, I think. Get someone, monitor, look at your energy profile. Then go and find and talk to one of those companies about what you can do about it. Go green tariff as soon as you can and put the pressure on. But see yourself as part of that solution. And another quick one is before, especially if you're buying bits of equipment, whether that be computers or a manufacturing bit of kit, or you're going to go and rent a new office, or any of those big decisions, check the environmental impact out on them, because what you don't want is stranded assets. What you don't want to do is to be ordering a new machine next week without having done the energy check on it.
Yep.
So immediately, anybody watching this, just pick up the phone of whoever does the purchasing and say, whoa, slow down. Make sure you ask every single person who you're about to buy anything off what their energy impact is.
Great strategy. So
and that thing is starting now. You can get the energy audit done on your thing. But I had this conversation with someone the other day, and they're a global company who, 1,800 staff worldwide. And I said this to them about 1.5 years ago. And I was talking to one of them last week, and he said, that one paid off. He said, we ended up, because this lot manufacture, they have big manufacturing machinery. And they managed to get someone in one of the other countries, not the UK, but that person had that bit of advice and came back, and yet they saved us because they were about to buy a machine that the return period of the built-in asset to make the return and deliver its value would have been at least 5 years.
Yep.
But they were able to make the right decision and push the person selling that to them to go and think about it as well. And we all have power. Every single person watching this has, if again, another company I know that, turnover of 30 million. And until I said to them that 30 million of your turnover, every single one of those pounds can be spent well or unthinkingly. That's how much power you've got.
Yep.
I bet you all the people tuning in and watching this now, if you added up the value of all of their companies, we'll be up into the hundreds of millions probably.
Absolutely.
And so that's hundreds of millions of pounds that can start to say, can we just shift this way. This is our direction. We're going to go over there with our hundreds of millions of pounds, rather than, oh, I hadn't thought of that. We have to think.
Very, very wise. Chris, do we have to lower our standard of living here in the Western world or developed world to save the planet for the future?
Our standard of living, some of our standard of living is pretty stuffed up anyway. Physical and mental well-being, not exactly high. You know, our connection, our stress levels. I think our societies are fractured. So I think by slowing down a little bit, connecting with each other and the planet a bit more, will actually increase the quality of our lives. You know, so we should, and that is a challenge to the environmental and sustainability movement. We have to accept that. But actually, again, those two pounds of t-shirts, you know, the thing of always having something new. There's this, I think there's a statistic that comes out every time there's a big new global sporting thing like the Olympics or the World Cup or rugby or football or whatever. Everybody goes out and buys their brand new, you know, 600-inch TV. The moment that that sporting thing is finished, you're just left with the TV.
Yep. And
yet you've changed it, and now you've got to pay for it. And you probably didn't even think about the environmental impact of it.
Yeah.
And it didn't really improve the quality of your life that much.
Yep. Instant gratification, but long-term pain.
Long-term. And I think those are some of the values that we, and again, yeah, that kind of thing of values. What is it we truly value?
Yep. No, very, very good. Chris, what would you go back and tell an 18-year-old Chris Hines? What one piece of information that you've learned over your lifetime, what would that be?
Believe that you have the right and the skills to have a voice. And I think everybody does, you know, like this young guy I mentor now called Louis VI is a rapper and a zoologist. He got a degree in zoologist, and he's a musician. But he's got his own session that, because he believes and steps forward, and I go, yeah, you can, Louis, you're right, go. And he's got his own session at COP in the green zone.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's that thing of course you've got the right to go and answer it, but be respectful, but push the limits.
Yeah.
You've got as right. We've all got as much of a right as anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think there's a better way too, Chris, rather than people gluing themselves to freeways and trains and stuff like that? And I'm not quite sure whether that actually endears people that are maybe well-meaning, but to the general population that looking like with the disruptions and whatnot. Is there a better way? Is there a better strategy?
It's a tough one. I can understand why people are angry. And if this COP thing 26 doesn't go well, people are going to get a lot angrier. And people, you know, people are dying at the moment in places like Bangladesh and, you know, some of the South Sea Islands, they are going underwater. You know, these things are very, very real. But I think it's down to us to use every tool that is used to sell a version of the world to us. We need to use those tools better. And, you know, I can understand someone gluing themselves to something if there's no other route through, but I think there's lots of other routes through. But I understand the anger. You know, I woke up this morning and I'd watched a whole load of COP stuff last night, and I was down this morning, you know, and I've got my, you know, my cup here that says relentless optimist. But this morning I wasn't feeling optimistic hearing what was going on there. So I understand the anger, but channel that anger into passion, and channel that passion into being better. Yeah, we have to be better than the world that is currently selling us. But it does make you really, you know, we were pretty angry when SAS were campaigning against raw sewage, and you have to have that because it's the bit that fires you up.
Yeah.
But you know, I've never been arrested, but I've jumped over a fence before with my wetsuit on, gas mask on my head. Someone threw 10-foot inflatable turret behind me, and I got within 2 yards of Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister, and the hand of security, MI5 or MI6 or whatever, said that's close enough, Mr. Hines. But I was able to say, you know, you do realise, Mr. Blair, while you're in Cornwall, if you do a poop, it's going straight in the sea. And he kind of went, oh, that's very interesting, Mr. Hines, I'll note that down. But I guess I was allowed to do that because they knew I wasn't going to harm him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'd worked our way to there. If they didn't know of us, but, you know, again, I sometimes get a bit frustrated when I talk to some of the kind of campaigners, and they're going, yeah, but we need to stomp it down. And I said, you need to be intelligent about this.
Yep.
You know, and they say, what do you know? And I'm probably one of the few people in my village to have an MI5 file on me, because I never got that close to Tony Blair without having someone having checked me out pretty thoroughly.
Yep. Yep. So, Chris, I'm all for providing solutions rather than highlighting problems. So, you know, I'm on the same page for sure. What's next on your agenda?
A new hip. So that'll get me back into the sea. I've been belly boarding, but I think it's some of it's passing on that kind of passion and helping companies to understand the force that they can be. And again, you know, go and have a look at B Corporation, reach out, you know, if someone wants, you know, I think it's good to have someone sit through that first B Corporation business impact assessment with you.
Yep.
It's great if you can get a B leader, but they're hard to find. But, you know, there are other people. I've done several. But get going. Get going. I think that's what we need to do now. It's just, you know, don't wait. Don't procrastinate anymore. There is no time.
Yep. Yep.
For the planet, but also for your business, because other people are moving all the time on this.
Chris Hines, MBE. It's been my absolute pleasure to have you on the program today, and I'm sure people will go away and the little thinking cogs will begin to turn and whir a little bit. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and your insights on the show, and I'm sure people will take advantage of it. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and I'm so glad you kind of like contacted me to do so. Brilliant. Take care. Love to all. And I think there's a little thing as well. Love each other rather than hate each other.
Great points, Chris. Thank you very much.